Hey y'all, this is Ronan Chris Murphy, and the big news for me this week is I am back in business. Yes! So if you don't follow my daily exploits, just over 3 months ago, a giant tree fell down, completely destroyed my home and studio and a lot of the gear. But thanks to a lot of amazing people offering different kinds of support to fix gear, lend me gear, help get me into new space, I finally have a functional studio up and running, which I'm very excited about. It is wonderful not to have to say no to cool jobs when they come in. So after about 3 months of being mostly out of commission, I am super stoked to be back at it. And yeah, I'll share some photos of the new studio space soon, but I'm getting new speakers on Wednesday, which I'm so stoked about, and some other things. So when I get that dialed in, I'll share some photos, but it's actually turning out to be a really comfortable, good sounding space. I'm very excited about that. So I had an idea to, why don't I do a Q&A video? So I reached out on my Facebook group, Ronan's Recording Bootcamp Hang, and I'll put a link for it below the video. But I put this out to people in the group, said, I want to do a video answering some questions. Hit me up with your best questions. And I thought 5 minutes, I'd just go through a few. But they were really good questions. And because they were really good questions, lots of them are not 30-second answers. So I'm actually going to break this down into a series of videos. And this one comes from a guy named Ethan who asked, what are my favorite 3-mic drum recording techniques? Which I love the question. And at the end, I'm also going to talk about some 2-mic techniques, because so many people just have a small interface to record with. And sometimes you want to record real drums because it's awesome. But so anyway, like most things in recording, it depends. How are we going to mic something? Whether it's a violin, a voice, a drum set, a church organ, it depends on the kind of music we're making, the space we're in, the style and caliber of the player. All these things come into play. But there are some general guidelines about how I approach this. So with 3-mic techniques, I'm almost always using one of those for a kick drum mic, just to give me that control and balance down there. And then the next part depends on what is the style of music, or what is the role that these drums are going to play. If it's something kind of organic, where the drums are kind of more of a support role, like they could be in a lot of traditional jazz or a singer-songwriter record, or Americana type country music, I'm usually that mic in front of the kick drum, and then, or inside the kick drum more likely, and then a space pair of overheads. I love space pairs of overheads. It's one area where I'm okay with the phase problems, just because I think it sounds really cool and offers a ton of flexibility in terms of balancing the drum set by moving these 2 microphones. You could also use an XY pair, which is great, much better mono compatibility, a little less flexibility in placement, but a really great way to go. So for something organic where we just want natural drums, that's an approach I really like. If I want something even more natural sounding, or I'm not getting what I want from overheads, one cool thing to do is put a space pair of mics out in front of the drum kit. And again, that could be XY as well. Try both. But maybe like 2 meters out, maybe 2 to 3 meters separated, depending on your room. But with just those 2 mics and the kick drum mic, you get a lot of flexibility with mic placement, and you can get some really great, beautiful, organic, natural sounds. That being said, in so many styles of music, whether it's rock, pop, funk, ska, punk, heavy metal, calypso, whatever, we're usually not going for natural. In all these kind of contemporary styles of music, the drums are really important, and we usually don't hear them in a natural way. We hear them kind of exaggerated or unnaturally balanced. So for these more contemporary styles of music, I'm much more likely to actually go with mic in front of or inside the kick drum, a mono overhead, and a mic on the snare drum. Move that mono mic around until you get a good balance of the whole drum set. You got the kick drum mic and then a snare. And the reason for this is, in all these contemporary styles of production, how we treat the snare drum in terms of how we EQ it, how do we isolate it, do we reverb it or not reverb it, should it be forward or back, all of these kind of things are so important in production styles. And we just have a pair of overheads, then we actually don't have that flexibility. So I would almost always give up stereo imaging to have that more control, because for the most part, you'd be surprised how many records you love have pretty mono sounding drums, especially when there's big guitars out to the side. So I'm not too worried about that. So that's going to give me a ton of flexibility: kick drum, overheads, and snare. And if you really are missing that sense of stereo, just go in with a little shaker and tambourine and throw those subtly off to the side, and that'll make the drum set feel plenty open and wide for most things you're working on. So 2 mic inputs, very important, or should I say 2 inputs, very important, because so many people are working with a small desktop interface that has 2 inputs on it. So can we get great drum sounds with 2 mics? Absolutely yes. Yes. So there's a couple ways I'm going to approach it. The first is, especially if it's a more kind of natural sounding drum set kind of thing, mic in front of or inside the kick drum and a mono overhead. If you get the drummer to play well and you spend time working on placement, you can actually get remarkably good drum sounds just with those 2 elements. And a lot of the old Beatles records were done that way. A lot of old Motown, jazz records. So a lot of great records were done that way. It's really simple and really effective. But there is a technique that I actually find offers a little bit more flexibility. If we are working on styles of music, again, that are more contemporary modern and require that slightly unnatural drum sound, one of the techniques I'd really like to use is first channel, snare drum. Second one, if we have a small mixer available, is we'll actually run an overhead and a kick drum mic into our mixer and record the line out of that mixer into our interface. So we have snare drum on channel 1. Channel 2 is a combination of overhead and kick drum. The reason this is cool is, one, many times that's enough if you got a good balance of kick and overheads, but it also gives us a ton of flexibility. So we have that isolated snare, so we can reverb or EQ or compress it to get kind of a modern sound. Super important. But the other one is we actually have a lot of flexibility in the mix after the fact. The reason for kick and overheads is kind of its low-level stuff, high-level stuff, and snare is kind of in the middle. So what we can do is we have our snare drum track, and then we duplicate that kick and that overhead track. And then we use a low pass filter, hopefully like 6 dB per octave, and take off a ton of the high end on that. This is now our kick drum track. On the next one, we do a high pass filter and we take off a ton of the low end. This now becomes our overhead track. So we now have snare, kick, and overhead, and a fair amount of balance. But one step further is if we are really going for modern rock sound with just these 2 inputs, we can duplicate those again and then radically EQ our kick drum track, like really, really steep high pass and low pass filters, and even like a boost around 70 hertz. And then we can send that into something like Slate Trigger and trigger off a very modern sounding kick drum. And we also have an isolated snare drum. So I made a mistake. The other one we duplicate on this next part is the snare drum. So we can now send the snare drum to, again, something like Slate Trigger. So we now have natural snare, a more or less kick drum mic, a more or less overhead mic, and then we have kick and snare samples. And just having those few elements gives us a tremendous amount of power, way more than you could ever expect with just 2 inputs. And if you want to dive deeper into my approach to drum recording, I have a 12-hour drum recording class online called Drum Recording Bootcamp at drumrecordingbootcamp.com. And normal price for that is $247, but I'm doing a fundraiser because I'm still trying to raise money to deal with my smashed studio and house. So it's pay whatever you want. So you can pay full price if you want, or you can pay $5 if you want. It's all good. I'm grateful for all of it. And at least at the time of shooting this video, we're still doing the pay what you want. Eventually, it'll go back to a regular sale. But for now, pay what you want. So that's it. I hope this was helpful a little bit. And again, I'm so happy to be back working in the studio. And we'll see you all the next time.